Welcome to our study of the Kangyur Rinpoche, the Treasury of Precious Qualities by Omniscient Jigme Lingpa. So as always, kindly begin with preparing with bodhicitta. This is the intention that we bring to the study, recognizing how this addresses the core issue that lies at the very base of all existence, namely the cause of suffering that lies in the delusion that constructs a solid reality, even though reality doesn't have that nature, simply being fooled by appearances, that there's something and we attribute existence to it, there's perception and we attribute solidity to that, which in fact has no basis for solidity. Similarly, with our own experience of the subjective self, we think that because there's a cognition, that necessarily means there's a me. But in fact, if we analyze, we are so many different things, and there's nothing that is constant, unique, permanent, unconditional, unchanging, and so forth. And that also applies to the phenomenal world. But we've gotten ourselves caught in this condition in which we operate with a notion of self and other, the object that is pleasing, the objects that are displeasing, and as such, continually solidifying object, becoming uptight with regards to the subject, we struggle in samsara. And the mind gets caught in these spaces, what we call the six realms, on the basis of this perpetual, this continual pattern in which our actions construct various experiences. And particularly now in the Yönten, we are looking at, namely then, the law of karma, which is how actions, they they have an impact. I don't know if you can hear, but there's a little bit of noise happening here, but I think it might be over. There's a bit of luck. Anyway, let's look at the text. So anyway, preparing our mind with bodhicitta, the wish to get to the bottom of things and to alleviate the suffering that is common for ourselves and all sentient beings. So this is where we're then looking presently at karma, and we're looking at karma, of course, means cause and effect, but it's very important that we don't sort of conflate or confuse this with some of the rather simplistic renditions of karma, both in terms of, you could say, reward and punishment, as we sometimes see it in the various religious contexts. You know, you do this and this happens, but also within Buddhism, sometimes also there's a little bit, or you could say the way that karma gets appropriated as just being this one-shot deal. You do something, it has this effect. And that is exactly what we're presently looking at, namely the complexity of this. So we could say, for example, yes, an apple seed creates an apple tree, but you know, there's not a single apple tree that's the same. And similarly also with regards to all the countless conditions that go into any single actions, the result plays out in countless ways. But it's good for us to have some idea that, first of all, what we do has an impact, what we do matters. And this also is very empowering in terms of us being the ones that are actually, you could say, responsible, but also in charge and empowered in terms of creating the conditions for our own future. So we could say what got us here, we can't do much about, but certainly what happens in the future, we can do something about. But we need to take into consideration karma in the sense that actions, they are they result in various ways, depending on our attitudes and so forth. And also, we, of course, on the basis of what was in the past, we're also conditioned in particular ways. So we might not, for example, have the conditions to have the autonomy of free will to act in particular ways. There might be conditions in which we simply don't understand that our actions have an impact, and this is generally the condition of the lower realms, where there's just not really an understanding that what we do has an impact for what comes next. We just continually react. The higher realms are generally defined as places where there's the awareness that what we do has an impact. But there's a number of conditions, of course, that play out. And we have habitual patterns. We have varying degrees of obscurations. For some people, it's very simple. You know, you see how particular actions have particular results. And then for them, it's just very simple. Then you just do what's helpful and you avoid what's harmful. For others, it's more complex, and they're influenced by kleshas. They're influenced by toxic emotions. They're influenced by habitual patterns and so forth. So we understand there's a complexity that takes place. And we're also going to see here how the action then mixed with the intention has result in terms of the future situation. So anyway, we looked last time at this example of the two people who, one saw the Buddha statue that was uncovered and put a shoe to protect it, and the other one said, goodness, you know, this shoe shouldn't be on top of a Buddha, and removed it. And both actions actually constituted positive actions. And that's why we need to understand the complexity of this. A very beautiful and very simple, beautiful example, and also several were mentioning the example of Kongpo Ben, who had the the Holy Buddha statue and plaster the jaw, look after his shoes. And I think incidentally also there's part of that story is that the Kongpo Ben, he helped himself to some of the offerings, you know, sort of some of the tormas, he sort of dipped them in the butter and helped himself. So, but all of that, not negative actions, but entirely because of his good heart actions, which were condoned by by the Buddha Joe. So so here now in 15, it reads, thus, now we're going to be looking at positive actions. Thus, constancy, determination, no opposing force, relation with the fields of supreme qualities and benefits. By these 5 factors, it is taught that sins and virtues' weight is to be gauged. So thus has spoken Jigme Lingpa, and that, of course, is probably a good time to invoke Jigme Lingpa. This is again my fault for getting the opening supplication. So we'll just invoke Riksen Jigme Lingpa at this point. The source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable. Emanation of Longchen, heir to a treasury of mind traumas. Sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity. Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So now looking at the commentary from Kangyur Rinpoche. Let's see here. So Kangyur Rinpoche says, in the desire realm, the importance of actions, positive or negative, depends on the presence or absence of 5 factors. The first is the factor of constancy, namely a continuous intention to perform the action. So this might, for example, be a sense of kindness and dedication to those in need. So we might serve them in various capacities, financially, maybe with help of one kind or another. But there is that continual presence of wishing to benefit others. The second is the factor of determination, by virtue of which the agent is not distracted from his or her purpose by some other interest. So in us reaching out to others, it's not as if we stop halfway and say, I don't know if I actually feel like doing this, or there's something interesting on TV or whatever. We actually follow through. The third factor is the absence of any countermanding force, whereby the intention is attenuated by opposing considerations. So that's also where there's the following through. There's not the intention is not you could say diminished. The fourth and fifth factors consist in whether the action has as its object the field of exalted qualities or the fields of benefits, respectively. So these are then what we call objects of offering and objects of generosity. The field of exalted qualities is a technical term for the three jewels. The field of benefits refer to the parents of the agent and those to whom a debt of gratitude is owed, as well as all objects of compassion, such as the chronically sick, road-weary travelers, and poor beggars. So there's the two categories to whom we then, you could say, extend our giving, which can then be objects of offering, the three jewels, those that are beyond samsara, and us. In making offerings to the three jewels, you might say, well, they don't need it. No, but we need to actually connect with the three jewels, in the sense that the moment that we are connecting with the three jewels, we're not just objectifying the three jewels as external, but through the act of offering to them, we're actually connecting with the absolute quality of the three jewels within ourselves. So as such, these are sublime objects that, while they don't need our generosity, we need to make offerings to them, simply to create the conditions for achieving or connecting with their level. The other are those that need our benefit, that need our generosity, and that's then other sentient beings, those that are objects of our compassion, the chronically ill, road-weary travelers, poor beggars, and sometimes we also add the aging and also children. The assessment of the gravity of a positive or negative action thus depends on whether the action is directed at one or the other of these two fields, and whether the first, second, or third motivating factors are present. So the degree to which the value of this action, I have a little bit hard time seeing how there's a negative action involved here. It seems to mainly be positive action, since we're actually talking about the object being the three jewels or the objects of compassion. But anyway, we can understand that the attitude behind the action, what precedes the action in terms of our determination, attitude, constancy, and so on, and then the object that determines the impact that this has on our mind. So if we have a good intention, we're constant, we follow through, that leaves a very strong sort of positive trait, or you could say pattern in our mind. Whereas we might have some inspiration to benefit others, but then we'd rather be doing something else, or we don't follow through, we're fickle. Then of course, then it has less of an impact. And also we might make, instead of making offerings to the three jewels, we might make offerings to those that are not particularly worthy, or just giving to our friends and so forth. So of course, all of the action, the impact of the actions, the result of our actions, it's complex, depending on the attitude, the object, and so forth. Now we come to something which really explains, you could say, the phenomenon of karma, the phenomenology of karma. And that is how actually this happens within the confused mind, on the basis of the ground consciousness, the basic condition of confusion. We then have the mind that is deluded and thinks self. So not properly understanding the nature of mind, constructing the notion of self. Then there is the consciousnesses of this self. So in all, we talk about 8 consciousnesses: the ground itself, which is this unconsciousness, the failing to see the nature of reality. That's where we essentially mistake what we call the Dharma Dhatu, or the awakened condition. We mistake that for simply just being a condition that's the object of a subject. And as such, within that deluded misunderstanding, then we have the alaya vijnana, or you could say the unconscious condition, the mindless condition. And within that, then, there's this sense of I. And that me is what holds that toxicity of continually wanting something and avoiding something else. There's continually the agenda of me. And that me is equipped then with the various perceptions in terms of the 5 sense perceptions, what we see, what we hear, and so forth, and also the thinking mind that's also regarded as consciousness. So we talk about these 5 senses, and then we also talk about the mind as the 6th consciousness. And then we have, in addition to that, then the ground, the storehouse consciousness, and then the mind that thinks I. So that is probably familiar to some of you as what we call the 8 consciousnesses. So here Jigme Lingpa explains this beautifully then in this verse here, where it says, the indeterminate alaya is the ground of all. From this, the consciousnesses, 1 of mind and 5 of sense, arise. The demon ignorance pervades them all and wields the 3 defilements, whence samsara's realms, both high and low, derive. So all of this is what creates samsara. This is, this is what got us here. And so the indeterminate alaya is the basis of our entire existence. And we say it's indeterminate in the sense that it could go either way. It can create happy existences, it can create painful existences, but it's still just samsara. So happy existences, it's like Paltra Rinpoche, or in words of my perfect teacher, we have the image of a bead or insect trapped inside a jar. The higher realms is high up in the jar, and the lower realms are lower in the jar, but you're still trapped. But it is indeterminate in that the alaya can be whatever we make it, but it's still caught within the delusional condition. So all the 6 realms can play out there. Now, once we have that, then there's the sense of our experiences. So we are continually, you could say, incarnating or taking rebirth with our experience of our individuality, with our particular sense perceptions of the world around us. And that individuality, that sense of me, that's what here is referred to as the demon ignorance that runs through all of our, you could say, our perceptions, all our experience. And this is driven by the 3 defilements, the basic ignorance, the attachment, and aversion. That's also why at the hub of the wheel of existence, we see these 3 animals, the pig, the snake, and the rooster. And sometimes if you look in the detail, we actually see that the pig is actually vomiting, or anyway, out of the pig's mouth comes the rooster and the snake. So the pig is fundamental, you could say, ignorance, dullness, dimness. And from that then emerges this, and basically the sense of I, from which then emerges the attachment and aversion. So this is what drives samsara. So as long as we don't get to the bottom of that, then we wander in samsara's realms. So Kangyur Rinpoche then comments, he says, the fundamental basis upon which karma manifests is the so-called alaya, the indeterminate ground of all, which veils the uncompounded nature of the mind. So we would sometimes say this alaya is a bit like the night sky. So the sky, you could say, is innately illuminated when it's not veiled, but it is the condition of, so you could say it's the space of reality, except reality is just not seen. So you could say the place, the locus is the mind, but the mind is not seen for what it is. And so that's where the condition of the alaya, then we say it veils the uncompounded nature of the mind because of its habit of fixating and essentially operating from a sense of ignorance, of confusion. The alaya is a neutral and undifferentiated state and underlies all habitual predispositions. So it's on the basis of the alaya that all the karmic patterns, they are, you could say, embedded, what we call vasanas, or the habitual patterns. Its nature is co-emergent ignorance, but out of it arises, nevertheless, the factors of clarity and knowing, which are comparable to the limpid surface of a mirror. So the very nature of this this condition of alaya is one of ignorance, but of course its basic quality is one of cognition. So there is this cognitive quality, there's a quality of manifesting experience, but it nevertheless operates from the ground of ignorance. So it's arises, but it's still ignorant. You could say the capacity is still there, but it serves this essentially ignorant agenda. So this is the alaya vijnana, the fundamental level of consciousness, the working environment for the ebb and flow of the seven consciousnesses arising from it. So we call it the ground of all, the basis, the basic consciousness. Of these, the mental consciousness cognizes objects in the most general sense. So this is the sort of the general sense of just that we can think. I say, don't think of a shoe. There's a clear image of a shoe, right? So that's we can't see that. I mean, I can't see it, but you can see it. It's in your mind's eye, so to speak. So that's where we can remember things, we can think of things, and in fact, we have images that are continually arising within this consciousness. So that's a mental consciousness. Now, the defiled emotional consciousness, Tibetan is nyönyi, and it literally means the mind, the crazed mind. This inwardly grasps as the ego or self, on the basis of which outer experiences are divided up into wanted and unwanted. This is where we get difficult. We become fussy. There's objects out there, but we have, on the basis of our particular disposition of ego, particular disposition of a solidified sense of me that solidifies others, and that sort of continual experience, there is what we call wanted and unwanted. So that's the emotional, defiled emotional consciousness. So then we have the various other consciousnesses. The visual consciousness perceives shapes by means of the organ of sight, and the other sense consciousnesses function similarly in their different ways, up to and including tactility, which experience physical sensation through the body. The six consciousnesses, so this is the ones that we group together as the six consciousnesses, the five sense consciousnesses and the mind, do not in themselves generate karma, even though karma is accumulated when these consciousnesses manifest. So we, for example, have eye organ, right? And on the basis of the object, there's a wall, there's a window in front of us or whatever, a computer. That's object. Then there's a functioning organ, the eye, and there's then the consciousness on the basis of which then, or rather on the basis of the object and the functioning organ, then we generate then the notion of, I call that a wall, I call that a window, and so forth. So this is how these perceptions happen, but they're neutral. If you look at the 12 links of dependent origination, there's one in which we talk about consciousness where we see a house with 5 or 6 windows, and there's a monkey in there. And we would say the monkey is always just looking out. The monkey is this defiled mind, and it's always looking out through one of these windows. So these are like the 5 or the 6 perceptions that we have. So they, in and of itself, these consciousnesses, they're not creating karma. What's creating karma is the monkey in there that's sort of having an attitude about, you know, what it's perceiving, tasting, touching, etc. The latter are, and this is then referring to the mind. If we look in the root text, then that's where it talks about this, the demon ignorance. Yeah. So it says the latter are, and also the the likes and dislikes. The latter are, however, permeated by the ignorance of apprehending the personal and phenomenal self. Personal and phenomenal self is the self that we give to the subject, the solidity of the subject. The phenomenal self, that's the solidity that we attribute to the phenomena, the stuff out there, the apparent external world. And so that's the ignorance that runs through our perception. This, Kangyur Rinpoche says, this ignorance is the root of all delusion and sorrow. It is a great demon, nurturing the three poisons and the afflictions, due to which beings either perform negative actions and fall into the lower realms, or accumulate positive actions tending to happiness, which propel them into the higher states of existence, but do not lead to liberation, being still within the sphere of ignorance. So all again, this is still, we can engage in positive actions and negative actions. And these then, on the basis of these, based on the three poisons, you know, then we continually operate with this sense of self. But then again, there's times where we are more positive and create the basis for higher realms. Very often we're more caught by negative conditions, and we create conditions for the lower realms. So you wish there was some sort of how do you say, bill of samsaric rights, in which there should be an equal distribution throughout higher and lower. But unfortunately, it's not, and generally due through the insecurity and the nature of this toxic self, and there's more inclination towards negative actions. Anyway, so whether it's negative or positive, all of this takes place within the all ground, the sphere of ignorance. See here. So I think this is Tingchen Rinpoche who comments, in the case of ordinary beings, it's hardly necessary to mention that ignorance is the root of the three poisons. But it is said that until the defiled consciousness is transmuted, meaning this sense of me, essentially what we in modern vernacular refer to as ego, but it's a bit more complex than just sort of the notion of I am in a particular way. It's essentially ignorance and constructions of ignorance that are dynamic and changing and workable. But it is, as long as there is this sense of self, there is this defiled consciousness. So until we're free of that, and that is of course what the entire Buddhist path is about, until that is transmuted, until we eliminate the ignorance and the patterns of ignorance, then Kangyur Rinpoche says the acquisition of higher qualities will also be hindered. By higher qualities is meant, for instance, the ability to visit pure Buddha fields and the effortless rising of thought transcending wisdom. So this means in the absence of cognitive obscuration, the weakening of, you could say, our dualistic grip, then we begin to see reality purer. And that's where no longer perceiving phenomena, both in terms of the self of person and also the phenomenal self, having less grasping on that, they begin to manifest free of our confusion and our confused projections, and they manifest then in their actual nature. And this is where we then refer to the nature as being pure. This is the basis for what we call pure perception, or sacred outlook is the vision of how things actually abide without obscurations. And it's on the basis of seeing without obscuration that we then see reality in terms of pure Buddha fields. And also wisdom that's no longer, you could say, not simply the wisdom of not being confused. And this is true even among those who are residing on the sublime Bodhisattva grounds. So up until the very highest level of the Bodhisattva, until the attainment of enlightenment, essentially, then there is a gradual refinement in which then there is a greater and greater ability to essentially see beyond the obscurations that we are talking about presently in terms of our karma. So Kangyur Rinpoche says, actions producing rebirth in the upper realms are tinged with pride or envy. In the first case, they produce birth among the gods and humans. In the second, they tend to birth among the asuras. It is in this way the different levels of samsara come about. So when we talk about the five kleshas, which are basic to attachment, aversion, and ignorance, this is then how it plays out. You could say additionally, you have the three poisons, but then also we have, you say, the pride. When want is actually when we get what we want, then there's this sort of sense of arriving, and that's the condition of pride. And then there's the when wants are not fulfilled, then there's the condition of resentment about where we are, envy. So we have, in addition to the three root kleshas, we then have these two conditions of pride and jealousy, or pride and envy. And so while the three root kleshas, ignorance and aggression and greed, or attachment, aversion, and ignorance, they construct the lower realms, then the higher realms also, they are permeated by the condition of ego and by the conditions here then pride and envy. So this is how the various levels of samsara come about. So propelling and completing actions. Okay, this is, oh yeah, this is still along the same lines. Okay, two kinds of action, which can be either positive or negative, play a part in this process. First, there is propelling action, which projects into a specific samsaric state, followed by completing action, which generates the circumstances experienced within this state. So we can simply think of one as the action that we're doing, and then also the attitudes that accompany a particular action. These two kinds of actions are interrelated according to four possible permutations. One, when the propelling and completing actions are both positive, we wish to do something good, we follow through and we rejoice in it, then Kangyur Rinpoche says, birth in the realms of gods or humans is attained, together with the enjoyment of every kind of excellence, such as good family, physical strength, beauty, high renown, and great prosperity. When positive propelling action is complemented by negative completing action, birth in the higher realms occur, but it is marred by the possession of impaired faculties and other handicaps, or else by the domination of others. So we might do something good, but then we might actually resent that we did something good for others, or we might sort of, in one way or another, they taint the initial positive action. So that's where there might be some good rebirth. Somebody was asking about how, since the human realm is so precious, how come such negative persons are reborn in the human realm? And this is for this very reason, that there is a positive action that's then complemented by a negative completing action. That said, the whole issue of karma by definition is complex, and we would overall say it's only a Buddha that really is capable of understanding the workings of particular phenomena, how they come about in terms of karma. We really can see the workings of karma. It takes someone with complete omniscience. Then 3, when both propelling and completing actions are negative, the result is birth in the lower realms, where nothing but suffering is experienced. So these are, you could say, the first and the third, they're quite clear. That's pure positive actions, pure negative actions. The others, they're mixed bag, including the fourth one where it says, when negative propelling actions is accompanied by positive completing actions, situations arise like those of certain animals or pretas, which despite their unfortunate condition, enjoy great beauty, strength, magnificence, and wealth. So that's where, you know, there might be some action that takes you into the animal realm, but then also there's some goodness, and that's where we so often see animals that have remarkable qualities. Okay, I actually looked into this, and I must say, maybe I had the wrong edition, but I couldn't find. Page 73 wasn't related to this. So anyway, according to the Sotrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika schools, okay, I think we mentioned this earlier, but you know, we have four what we call tenets. This is particularly from the Mahayana perspective, but we talk about the Vibhashika, the Sotrantika, the Chittamatra, and the Madhyamika schools. The first two, they're associated with what the Mahayanists call Hinayana, what we sort of, in political correct lingo these days, refer to as the Shravakas, and so forth. And then there's the Chittamatra and Madhyamika, which are Mahayana. And so these are the four tenet schools that generally we understand wisdom in terms of various ways in which we have increasing clarity with regards to how to understand reality. So we talk about these philosophical tenets, or drumta. So according to three of these, the Sotrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika, a single action may give rise to one or many existences. An example of the first case is the story of the woman who was reborn in the heaven of the pure because of the compassion she had for her daughter. I'm thinking that this might be the story of mother and daughter that was swept away by the river, and they both, well, at least here in the case of the mother, she just wanted to save the daughter, and in dying, she was reborn in the heaven of the pure because of that compassion at the moment of her death. The second case is illustrated by the words of Arya Aniruddha, who proclaimed that through the ripening of a single good action, he was born 7 times as a god in the realm of the 33, and afterwards as a wealthy member of the Shakya tribe. I think this is the story of the young child who, I think we mentioned this last time, who offered some peas, just chucked some peas sort of in the direction of the Buddha, the first Buddha we had in this eon, and as a result then had these rebirths. He simply just chucked these peas because there was such a sublime object. This actually had this incredible result. Yeah, this was last time, how a small action can have a great result. It is claimed, moreover, that several actions can combine to give rise to a single life, as in the case of Devadatta, who, due to actions accumulated over a series of lives, was both a monk and an evildoer. So you remember the Buddha's cousin Devadatta. He's the one who, first of all, when they were young, the one who shot the bird. I think it was a swan, and then also he's later somebody who actually had an incredibly negative impact, really, in terms of the Sangha, actually at one point in the Buddha's life, actually creating a schism in the Sangha. So he's regarded as somebody who was in many ways rather bad news. But then again, he was reborn as the Buddha's cousin. He became a follower of the Buddha and so forth. On the other hand, several actions can produce several existences, as happened to Arya Upasena, who experienced a series of lives that were the result of numerous individual acts. Okay, I'm not sure about that one. In the Abhidhamma Kosha, however, it is said, and I think this is just a comment on Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu, the author of the Abhidhamma Kosha, is normally considered to be a Sotrantika in his Hinayana period. Okay, as we know, Vasubandhu was the brother of a Sangha. Sangha was one of the great we call the two supreme, together with Nagarjuna. He was sort of the two supreme masters of the Mahayana. So he was a great Mahayana master, Sangha, and he had a brother, Vasubandhu, who was also a great Buddhist master, but he wasn't a Mahayanist. And then he went to debate with the Sangha, and he actually, after debating with the Sangha, he then became a Mahayanist. But until then, he belonged to the Hinayana school, and as such, is generally seen to be a proponent of what we call the Suttanta. But his possibly most famous work, the Abhidhamma Kosha, was, it's here we have in the footnote, was composed from the Vibhashika point of view. So there's a lot of the Abhidhamma that we study is very much then coming from the Vibhashika point of view. Okay, I don't think this affects the discussion much, but there you have it. Anyway, this shows that the Vibhashika hold that one propelling action brings about only one birth, and several propelling actions result in several existences. Okay. Bottom line is it's complex, but we can understand this in terms of the initial attitude and action, and then the attitudes and the ways in which this, you could say, that mitigates the further results of the action. The performed and stored aspects of actions. An action propels into a specific birth depending on its gravity and intensity. This in turn is assessed according to the action's performed and stored aspects, which according to their four permutations are as follows. An action is both performed and stored when, for example, a person wishes to inflict harm on another, does so, and is constantly satisfied at the resultant situation. This is a little bit like we had before, yeah? So somebody wishes to harm and then manages to harm, goes, yes, I managed to harm so-and-so. An action is performed but not stored when, for example, one is obliged against one's wish to harm enemies or deprive people of their possessions in order to save life or to prevent lawless people from ruling the country unjustly and in violation of the Dharma. Okay, this is a bit like we talked about last time, the young men that are sent to war. Yeah, we talked about that and the karmic situation, and that's exactly where what this takes into account, really, that one might not have any desire to kill, but then again, one ends up in a situation where one is either drafted or in one way or another ends up causing harm to others. So that's where this could be done with the motivation to, I want to serve my country and so forth. An action is stored but not performed when, for example, a person has long nourished the wish to deceive another, but in the event fails to do so. That's where somebody keeps this notion of, I'm going to harm you one day, and then they don't get around to it. And then again, even though they can't actually act it out. The intention is there, so there might not actually really be an action, but there's certainly the intention behind it. So that's also pretty bad. Finally, there are indeterminate actions that are neither performed nor stored. In other words, chance or unintentional actions that have no ripened effect at all. So that's where we drive by a tree, we have no attitude about the tree that we just drove by, and there's no particular action, even though you could say there is in terms of us just passing a tree, but it has no real effect. By weighing these four permutations and discerning the presence or absence of the five factors, constancy, determination, and the rest as explained above, the intensity of good or evil deeds in their two acts of being performed and stored may be evaluated, as also the extent of their specific results. Okay, so again, this is where there's complexity beyond measure here, and only a Buddha can know. But we do talk about some degree in which actions performed and stored. Of course, we can map our actions to some extent. We can understand what are our intentions, what's behind actions, whether physical or verbal or intentional, and then the sort of the way that it plays out. So in other words, performed, che, refers simply to the action as such. Stored, tha, refers to intentionality, satisfaction, and so on, which ingrains the effect on the mind stream. His Holiness Dalai Lama says the four permutations of the performed and stored aspects reveal whether the effect of an action will definitely be experienced. The first and third permutations indicate an action, the effect of which is certain to be experienced. And that's where we, for example, we wish to harm and we succeed in harming. We're happy about it. Or even the third kind, which is where we actually intend to do harm, we might not carry it out, but there is still a certainty that that sort of evil intention has an impact. The two other permutations are not attended by the same degree of certainty. So you can read more about that in the Dalai Lama at Harvard. Negative actions regarding the three jewels. Okay, so this what we had. Well, let's see. Okay, so let's see negative actions. What was it? 17. Yeah. It is as with a fiery conflagration, but for water there's no other remedy. Accordingly, there's no sin to match deception and rejection of the triple gem. Okay. So this is a bit like, as far as us being ill, it's pretty bad if we kill the doctor, so to speak. When a house is burning down, the only thing that can counteract the fire is water. But if the water is contained in a vessel and the fire evaporates it, there is obviously nothing to counteract the blaze. In the same way, if we destroy the representations of the body, speech, and mind of the Buddhas, if we revile and spurn the sacred Dharma, if we criticize and despoil the noble Sangha, if out of malice we forsake the three jewels and turn away from them and their protection, there is no remedy, no means of rectifying so great an evil. Consequently, no other action is as negative as that. So this is where we're cutting off the branch that we're sitting on. We're, taking out the doctor and so forth. There's nothing as bad as that. And it's, of course, there's not as if there is some kind of that it's, it's just that we are very partial to the Buddha, no more than we would be partial to the doctor that has the cure. So that's where it's simply just that we're cutting off our possibilities. The logic behind this is that the three jewels are the objects of confession, whereby one may purify even the most heinous of negative actions. The gravity of reviling or repudiating the three jewels consists in the fact that one abandons the very object whereby purification is possible. So you could say we're innately pure. We innately have the abiding purity. But to remove the temporary, fleeting condition of samsara, we need the condition of the guide, the remedy, the medicine. And if we destroy that, then it's not looking so good. The crucial role of intent. Let's just see if there's some questions. Okay. Is lack of intention the same thing as not being mindful about the harm one has caused someone? No, that would be different. Well, I suppose they're similar. Sorry, yeah. Lack of intention, same as not being mindful. I mean, we might step on, let's say we might step on an ant, or we might inadvertently do harm to others without the intention. And we don't have an intention to do them harm. Mindful, yeah, it's similar. I would say if we're not being mindful, then that indicates that we could, well, yeah, I think we can more or less say it's the same thing. Yeah, it's a lack of awareness. Yeah. So I have a question about an animal that accidentally circumambulated around a stupa unintentionally. However, this ripened in the life of a Buddha. That's right. So that's where, again, without the intention, yet there was the there was a particular virtuous action. So this again is an example of how actions have an impact. So even though it is this, there's a lack of intention, there nevertheless was a positive action. Yeah, this seemed to have a ripened effect. That's right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is what we're seeing various ways in which karma plays out. So you can say that actions have an impact, but of course, again, they are conditioned by the intentions and so forth. But they do have a, even without intention, then actions do have a result. How about Sattva cleanses the karmic actions? Well, this is where we talk about these four powers that essentially, you could say, create the circumstances in which a particular action then is mitigated. So that's where we would say that there's not a single action which cannot be purified. So that's where, with the application of the four powers, yeah, the the um, the support, the regret, the vow, and the practice, yeah. So if you look in the words of my perfect teacher, there's a lot about that in there. What would you say about mindful killing of mosquito or leech? Oh no, that would be intentional. So that would be both that we are intending to killing, and then supposedly then afterwards we'd say, yep, I've killed that leech, I've killed that mosquito. So that's where all these conditions really for negative karma are there. So yeah, so there's no mindful killing. It doesn't sound so good, you know. You know, yeah. Um, uh, Oh my gosh, that's so much worthy to be repeated. That stanza on the fire and water and the worst misdeeds being to forsake or do harm to our precious refuge to the triple gem, because they are precisely whom we can turn for purification of self. So glad Omniscient Jigme Lingpa teaches us this. Thank you. You're welcome. Well, yes, it's a privilege to be the conduit for this. Yes. If we are generous, but our miserly attitude arises in the midst of it, we recognize it as a vasana and go ahead with the action of generosity. How will it be stored? Well, this is true. So we might want to be generous, and then as we're in the midst of it, yeah, then we're thinking, oh gosh, I'm giving away all this, whatever. Yeah, that's habitual patterns. So this is where you could say the complexity of it, that one is there's a positive action, then again there's the holding back, and yet we still follow through. Then I would say, there's at the end of the day, it's as if we are not entirely held by the vasana, the habitual patterns, and we follow through. It's a bit like all the Bodhisattva practice that we do. We can't help to practice the Bodhisattva path imperfectly on the basis of our obscurations, habitual patterns, etc. But it doesn't mean that we should refrain from doing it. So even though we might have habitual patterns about our generosity, we should just follow through, be courageous. Yeah. And of course, the karmic situation is complex. It will be reflected in the result of it, but overall good. Yeah. Just we should actually break out of our habits, right? So So, how to deal with things like introduced pest animals. I think park rangers often kill them to save native animals. How do we approach these sort of things in the light of karma? Well, the same thing again. There's a regret to have to kill, but nevertheless doing it. Of course, there's different. Again, it's all about the subjectivity. So there might be some park rangers that take great delight in killing, and others who really feel sad but have to do it because of the nature of the situation. Again, the complexity of it. What if the house is infested by termites? Same thing again. That's where, again, we need to just do what we need to do. But of course, there would be a profound regret that we have to do it, Then again, you would have stories in the past of sages who just happily let their house collapse because they couldn't bear to kill this termites or whatever. But again, we should be careful not to say this is the way, this is right way, wrong way. It's just presently, yes, we're definitely getting some indication of what is right and wrong, but also we understand the complexity of it, hopefully. But that's also why there's so many things we can do. So, for example, if we have to, take out the termites or do something about it, then we can mitigate the result through prayers for the animals. And also similar, also if we happen to be park rangers or we're associated with these park rangers and the whole thing about pests and so forth, then we can do prayers. May I act? What negative karmic results would there be for a student on the Buddha Dharma pathway who has received all the lay precepts, Bodhisattva and Tantrikas, and then later regretted and abandoned it for another faith? Well, again, this is not up to me to be able to answer that, other than to say that it has everything to do with what we're putting into the storehouse consciousness. So somebody might have had maybe deep entrance into the path and then going to another path. Yes, that would have one aspect. Somebody might have a very superficial commitment, maybe just sort of tagged along because their friends sort of dragged them into something Buddhist, and then later that didn't really suit them. They went and did something else. So it's, again, I'm sorry to keep saying that, but it's complex. So also we shouldn't be too keen. I mean, for ourselves, we're really just using this as a map for understanding our own actions. It shouldn't really be that we're interested in putting down sort of a karmic legislation of some sort, Yeah, it's difficult for us, and we really shouldn't speculate about karma. This is again where one of the sutras where the Buddha says, don't speculate about karma, because only a fully enlightened Buddha really understands karma. What would you say of people saying Om Mani Padme Hum simply? Oh, sorry. What would you say of people seeing Om Mani Padme Hum simply by glance? Also, does the intention of the Mani Kava affect the temporary ultimate benefit or effect of the sacred imagery? All of it, right? So just someone traveling in Bhutan or Tibet or wherever and seeing the mantras carved on the hillside, just seeing it has an impact. We might be ever so little, even just seeing a movie where there's just a mantra, that has an impact. And of course, then also the attitude of the carver, for sure. Yeah. All of it adds to the picture. Yeah. We would say that even all the colors on the peacock's feather, the variety of every color is created by karma. So we can understand the complexity of everything. Yeah? Everything is created by so many different causes and conditions. But the main point here really is for us to have some sense of, like we've been giving these indications of how actions then are mitigated by their conditions, and that's what we want to take with us here, particularly in terms of our own actions. Come on. Okay. Is the greatest result for benefit a clean and true altruistic heart? Yes. That is exactly it. And so that's why, you know, when we, for example, begin this study, we always check our motivation. You know, why am I doing this? And this is not just when we're doing studies, but whenever we're doing anything, we always check our motivation. Why am I doing this? Not a sort of a narcissistic sort of fascination with me and what's going on with me, but more just being clear, you know, am I doing this, you know, with an agenda? Am I doing this? Is this clean? You know, and that's right. That is where it comes from, pure heart. That's where we're heading. That's what we want to cultivate. So the more we're mindful, the more we're conscious of what's going on, the more we're in control and can shape our attitudes. And that's then what then again lies at the basis of our actions. So yeah. Does the animal have the notion of me? Is the pattern of the notion of me the same as the human beings? Thank you very much. Yes, animals, just like us, they want to be happy. They want to avoid pain. And you know, for the longest time, within materialist science, from the time of Descartes, who in his sort of mechanistic reductionist worldview that there's soul and then there's matter, and everything in the animal realm was regarded as matter. For centuries, actually, scientists would just assume that animals have no consciousness or no sense of self, just like we did. But recently, and it was only like a year ago, there was 170 significant scientists, including people like Stephen Hawking, who signed a declaration that they're convinced that animals have this sense of me, of self. They don't want to die. They do care if they are, you know, happy or unhappy, you know, pleasure and pain. So thank you for giving us opportunity to check our motivation. Yeah, you're welcome. We'll keep doing that for a very long time. Let's keep doing this. So thank you. All right, we'll dedicate. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. By the way, the programs will recommence. There's been a little break here, except for this particular series. So tomorrow's program, the study of progressive stages on the meditation and emptiness, that recommences. It'll be online only. I think there's an email going out about it, but it'll run from 5 to 7. And then also Wednesdays, the study of the Way of the Bodhisattva and the Bodhisattva Guide, that recommences. And yeah, so we're back on track. Holiday's over. Okay. All right. Take care. Thank you.